They say Christmas is the most wonderful time of the year. A chance for families to gather together and celebrate the amazing story of a newborn king.
So what was the original thing that really drew you to this project? This is a story that's kind of been told over and over and over. Did you see something different in this project that you thought, hey, I could put something into this that's never been seen before?
I think, it's kind of going back to the original text and going, what if we don't try to come up with some kind of angle or spin, but let's go back to the original text and honor that. And one of the key ways in for me was the relationship of Mary and Joseph and what it was like to be in their sandals to, as a young couple, to bring into this world, a tough, rough world, a brutal world, the Son of God, and just what that took. And so I think that was kind of the perspective, and was just to try to be unvarnished and try to bring the audience into that world. I've often seen portrayals of Mary and Joseph where perhaps Joseph is very stoic and almost obligated and kind of second fiddle, and I was like, wait a minute, the God that I know and love and serve, I bet he would want his earthly parents to have loving parents that loved each other and created a loving family. So I hadn't really experienced that personally in a lot of portrayals. Um, and then was also just trying to show the context in which this young couple were living, how brutal Herod was, how brutal the Roman Empire was, what a dynamic time. Um, and then just kind of highlighting the upside down kingdom that Jesus represents and coming into that brutality. And he shows up to shepherds, he brings the whole light show to shepherds, they're the ones that got the spectacle. And even Mary and Joseph, they got Gabriel, and that would have been pretty cool. But they get the whole host, and he chose the most lowly, and you just go, oh, that's the God that I serve.
Yeah.
So I just think there's a reminder every year of what this is really all about, and especially in context of our complicated, divisive world today. I think it's just one of those simple reminders, that we got to look up more often.
I think that was an awesome aspect to this portrayal, especially, was the contrast between this little innocent baby coming into this brutal, dark, messed up world. And it was just so great to see that contrast, like you said, coming out to the humble of the society. Another cool thing that I saw you implement was, it wasn't like, oh, there's all these hotels lined up in Bethlehem ready to go. They would have stayed with family. They would have known people in the village, and it was cool to see like the family coming together to help facilitate the birth and all these things. That was completely unique. So to kind of talk about like kind of delving into some of the historical accuracy while trying to balance that with the emotional tones.
Yeah, there's like footnotes that I think are worth visiting.
Mm.
The wise men or the magi actually coming 2 years later, not at the birth of Christ. Why is that important? Well, it just shows the commitment and the scope that God would draw these people from these distant lands to come and find out. And versus everyone just kind of showing up at the same time, and like we portray in our little nativity sets. Is that, how significant is that? I think it's worth us knowing about that. And to your point with the cave, hospitality was such a key part of the ancient world. And we often, for whatever reason, someone must have written a song sometime that there's no room in the inn. And there's different interpretations of that word inn. Can actually mean a shelter. It can mean a room. That doesn't mean the Holiday Inn. And the fact that Bethlehem was this little village off the beaten track, it's most likely there was not a Holiday Inn there, and that Bethlehem was many. The origins of it is that this village was built on top of these caves so that they could be used, and these caves, in fact, were excavated even further, and they were like a basement.
Mm.
And since the place was packed out, they needed to bring her somewhere. And then there's also these Jewish customs about being set apart when you're giving birth. So they couldn't just, give birth in a crowded room. So just insight on that. But I really hope all of it nudges right back to who the character of God is, and an appreciation for those that said yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And the casting I thought was very unique for this story as well, because we always kind of see Mary as young or Joseph, but they're never as young as portrayed here, which is probably more accurate. And it's a much more fascinating, even scarier, more harrowing journey in that fact. Kind of like talk about like these people were so young to go through this.
I know. And that's what struck me too. And that as the life expectancy back then was not very long, and it was a rough world. And when you came into it as a kid, as a teenager, you had to grow up real quick. And so these young people thrust into this grand adventure. I mean, can you just imagine being a parent to any kid back then at that age, And like, and I remember when my first baby showed up, and I was like, I can't believe they're letting me go home from the hospital with my wife and I, this young couple. And we got the car seat in the safe car and the crib waiting. But imagine being born in a cave, and where the infant mortality rate was through the roof, and so many people died in childbirth. Like, it was a scary thing. And now add to the fact that this is the Son of God. What? You know? And even as a lifelong person of faith, and I come from a long line of ministers and missionaries and Bible scholars and on both sides, and a great appreciation for the original text. When you have to direct something and you have to visualize it, you're really forced to dig deep and understand this.
Mm.
And so if you can imagine this young couple holding this little baby, they're and that's alone is intense enough, but this is the Son of God. What? This infant? And and there's the Romans, and there's Herod, they're after me, and disease and all of that. And I was just like, wow, what if we could give a little glimpse to the audience of that? And I think
Yeah.
that would give us more appreciation of the people in the story and the reason for the story.
I think it adds to, we always say like, oh, the virgin birth is such a miracle. I think you kind of portrayed that the entire event, all the way up through his childhood, was miraculous because the odds are stacked against them. And I'm sure Mary was like the first woman to invent childproofing everything. What was it like working with Kevin Costner on this? Did he have more involvement than just hosting and narrating, or does he? It was cool to see the spiritual side and even the faith-filled side of him in this.
Well, he's an executive producer, and so what was important to him from the very beginning, those are his words, as he opens the show and talks about his own connection to the story as a kid. And so that all of that is very genuine and heartfelt. And I can't speak on behalf of him, but when you watch the show, you'll see what he says.
Mm.
Um, but it was a privilege, man. I've been a fan of his both as an actor and a filmmaker for a very long time. And so I was just thrilled, and I just didn't want to drop the ball, you know. So that was my main thing, and it was a joy to work with him, and a real privilege. And I think it hopefully you might agree that it's coming from a deep place.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. And you had a lot of different theological advisors and different people that you go to, like Francis Chan is one of them. How did that how did you balance and mix different theological backgrounds to kind of build up the story?
Yeah, what we wanted to do is try to be a unifying celebration of the story, and not one of theological debate, but one of honoring. And so we have our Catholic friend, Father Raftis, and he talks about a different perspective um, about Mary's labor, and that's a thing in question in the Catholic world. Did she actually have pain or not? And we wanted to recognize our Catholic friends and that they have a perspective, and then our evangelical friends have a perspective. But really, that's all kind of on the edges. The core is this happened. This is the Son of God, the basics, John 3:16. And so that was the thing that we really wanted to try to find, that unifying place as much as we could, and honor the text and honor the audience.
And going back to the original text, what for you as a director was like the most difficult thing to portray? Like you went back to the text and you're like, oh man, I haven't seen this, or this is going to be tough. What was it? Or was all of it?
I just tried to come from a place of humility with this whole project and telling this story, and just being on my knees, and really trying to let the heartbeat of the scriptures come out in some way. And in some way, in some scenes, you're more successful than others. Um, and my true north was the text. So, for example, the Simeon scene when he confronts Mary and Joseph and prays over baby Jesus, and that's just quotes right out of the scripture. And so I was like, what did that look like? This man who'd been waiting for decades, and he'd been promised to see the Messiah, and now he does. What would that have been like? So I think filmmaking is such a collaborative craft, and you hope and pray that every aspect comes together: the sets, the wardrobe, the makeup, the actors, the script, and that you're kind of the quarterback, and hoping that everybody is in alignment, and it all kind of feeds into the same spirit. And I think we did. I feel like we have something special here.
Yeah, for sure. And what do you hope ultimately audiences can walk away with after experiencing this story in this way?
Like we talked about before, it's the reason for the season, the Christ in Christmas, and let's not forget it, guys. And there's so much intention in this story that I really hope that people will point to the character of God and what he represents, on how he came, who he came to, when he came. All of this stuff is so important, and I just hope that people will go back to the scriptures themselves and unpack and learn and point them to the person of Jesus.
Journey back with me, Kevin Costner, for the story of the first Christmas like you've never seen it before. Tuesday, December 9th.